This is Honey Delver from Haiti, but today she lives in the United States of America, where she resides with her husband, Sean. This girl is 23 years old, while her husband is 51 years old. This girl, before she and her husband fell in love, used to have sexual relations with her female friends. However, today she has changed and has given her heart to her husband. She has a handsome husband, and her husband is very gentle. She and her husband love each other very much, and it has been a while since her husband gave her a ring as a symbol of love, telling her that his love for her will never fade. Listen carefully and hear how the story of their love began.
For most of my life, I identified as a lesbian. I knew from a young age that I was attracted to women, and I never really questioned it. Growing up in a supportive community, I had the freedom to explore my sexuality and embrace it. I had relationships with women, some were serious, some were fleeting, but they all felt right to me. I was happy and comfortable in my identity. But recently, something shifted inside me. I didn't expect it, didn't plan for it, it just happened. It started with an unexpected friendship. I met a man through mutual friends, someone who was older, wise, and experienced in ways that intrigued me. He was 51, which at first seemed like a huge age gap. I'd never really considered dating someone older than me, especially someone that much older. But he didn't make me feel like I was a child, and that alone caught my attention. We started talking more, and I realized how much we had in common. We both loved literature, deep conversations, and had similar values about life, even if our views about relationships were different. I didn't feel pressured or like he was trying to change me, he just accepted me for who I was. Over time, I found myself looking forward to our conversations, feeling excited when we met, and gradually, I realized that my feelings were evolving in a way I hadn't expected. I was beginning to care for him deeply, in a way I had never felt about a man before. I didn't want to label it as anything yet, because it was so new and confusing, but I couldn't deny it. It wasn't that I suddenly changed my sexuality overnight. I still loved women, and the attraction was still there, but something about him, his wisdom, the way he made me feel understood, and the deep emotional connection we formed, opened up a new kind of love in my heart. One day, after a long conversation about our lives and our past relationships, we kissed. And it was different than anything I'd experienced before, gentle, full of respect, and yet filled with a warmth I hadn't known I was missing. I was confused at first. It felt like a complete 180 from everything I had known about myself. I spent weeks processing it, trying to understand what this meant for my identity and my future. I wasn't sure if I was truly straight now, or if I was simply experiencing a new side of myself that had never been unlocked. But in that moment, it didn't matter as much. What mattered was how I felt when I was with him. One evening, we were sitting in his living room, sipping wine after a long day. He looked at me, his expression soft but serious, then asked, "Are you happy, truly happy with this? With us?" It wasn't a question I'd ever expected from him. I paused, thinking about everything I had been feeling, the confusion, the fear, but also the joy and warmth that seemed to grow with each passing day. I said, the words coming out more confidently than I expected. I never thought I would be, but I am. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I had made peace with it. I didn't need to have everything figured out to know that what we had was real. Sean wasn't just my partner, he was someone who saw me, really saw me, in all my complexities. He respected me, and I respected him. There were still moments where I found myself questioning my identity. Sometimes, I'd catch myself thinking about my past relationships with women, wondering if this would be a temporary shift or something deeper. But Sean never pressured me to define myself in any way. He simply loved me as I was. That unconditional support helped me realize that I didn't have to fit into a box. I could love a woman, and I could love him too, and both of those loves could be equally valid. After Sean and I started dating, there were moments when I'd catch myself second-guessing everything. Was this real? Was I betraying myself, or was this simply a new phase of my life? My friends, who knew me as a committed lesbian, were shocked when I told them about Sean. Some were supportive, others confused. They couldn't quite wrap their heads around how someone like me, who had spent so much time embracing a particular identity, could suddenly be with a man, especially one so much older. But Sean was patient through it all. He didn't rush me into making any decisions or labels, and he gave me the space to process everything. That's one of the things I love most about him, his respect for my journey, his wisdom, and the calm way he handled my internal struggle. At first, our relationship felt almost like an adventure, like I was stepping into uncharted territory, uncertain but willing to explore it with him. He'd been married before, and I could tell he had some scars from that, but he was open and honest with me about everything. That level of vulnerability felt safe, and it allowed me to open up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else before. I was beginning to see him not just as a partner but as a mentor, someone who had lived a full life and who could help guide me through some of the more difficult questions I had about myself and the world. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I valued his presence. Sean had this quiet strength, the way he spoke with such care, and the way he made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. It wasn't about his age, it wasn't about whether he was a man or not, it was about the deep emotional connection we shared. Our relationship was constantly evolving, and I was learning that sometimes love doesn't fit into neat boxes, and that's okay. I had once thought my sexuality was a fixed part of who I was, but now I knew that love, real love, could be expansive. It could surprise you, challenge you, and even change you in the best ways. Sean was now my partner, my best friend, and someone who made me feel safe to explore who I truly was, no matter where the journey took me next. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that I didn't need to have all the answers to be happy. All I needed was to keep living, growing, and loving. And with Sean by my side, I felt like I could do just that. Eventually, I decided to fully embrace the relationship. The love I felt for him was real, and though it was unexpected, I wasn't going to reject it because it didn't fit into the neat box I had built for myself. The age difference was still something that took some getting used to, but we had a strong emotional connection, and we supported each other in ways I had never imagined possible. As for my identity, I'm still figuring it out. It feels strange to say I'm straight because I don't think my sexual orientation is just a single label. I've always been someone who's more fluid and open-minded, and this relationship just added another layer to that. But what's most important is that I'm happy, and I'm in a relationship with someone who understands me deeply, who challenges me in the best ways, and who loves me for who I am, no matter how that evolves. So, here I am now, in a relationship with a 51-year-old man, and even though it was a path I never imagined, I wouldn't change it. As our relationship grew, we faced the usual challenges any couple might, balancing careers, finding time for each other, and navigating our differences. But there were also special moments that I never expected, like the time we went on a weekend getaway to the mountains. It felt like we had our own little world there, just the two of us, away from everything else. Sean held my hand as we hiked up the trail, his steady presence beside me grounding me. In the stillness of nature, I realized that no matter how different our paths had been, they had now merged into something beautiful and lasting. When I turned 24, Sean surprised me with a small anniversary celebration, just the two of us, in his cozy apartment, with a home-cooked dinner. It was simple, but it meant everything. As we clinked glasses, he said, "I'm so proud of you. You're more than I ever imagined. And I'm grateful to be part of your journey." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I kissed him, feeling more secure in the relationship than ever before. It wasn't about the age difference. It wasn't about the labels I had once clung to. It was about love, respect, and connection. Those things transcended everything else. I still didn't have a clear answer when it came to my identity, but I had found something deeper than labels, something real and beautiful in Sean and in myself. As the weeks turned into months, my connection with Sean deepened, and I realized I was falling for him in ways I hadn't anticipated. With every shared experience, every late-night conversation, every quiet moment together, I felt more certain that this wasn't just a fleeting attraction, it was something real. Sean had a way of making even the mundane things feel meaningful. It could be something as simple as cooking dinner together in his apartment, where we'd laugh about the mess we made in the kitchen, or going for walks in the park, talking about our hopes for the future. There was a calmness to our time together that was different from the whirlwind energy I'd had in past relationships. It wasn't about drama or excitement, it was about companionship, trust, and the joy of building something steady. One thing I came to appreciate was how open Sean was about his own vulnerabilities. Despite his maturity, he didn't hide behind a facade of having everything figured out. He was honest about the struggles he'd faced in his own past relationships, how he'd learned and grown from them. It made him feel even more human to me, even more accessible. And it made me feel like I could be open too. I guess in the end, I fell in love with him because of who he was, not because of how old he was. Sean's maturity, kindness, and genuine respect for me made me feel more secure and understood than I'd ever been in a relationship before. I wasn't just in love with the idea of being loved by a man, I was in love with him, his heart, his soul, and the way he made me feel like I was enough just as I was. It was unexpected, but it felt right. Sometimes love doesn't follow any set path or timeline. Sometimes, it just catches you off guard and makes you realize that there are all kinds of connections out there, and not all of them fit into neat boxes. And with Sean, I had found something that didn't need to be explained, it just was. I thought, I'm 23, I'm still figuring myself out, and he's already established in a way that seems so much older. But Sean didn't act like an older man. He didn't try to be the teacher or someone who would control things. He treated me as an equal, which was crucial to me. We didn't have a traditional dynamic. He didn't assume he had all the answers, and I didn't feel like I had to be a certain way just because of my age. The more I got to know him, the more I realized how much I admired his values, his integrity, his ability to be both emotionally available and independent, and his gentle but firm approach to life. It wasn't like any other relationship I'd had before. I'd been used to passionate but often chaotic connections, but with Sean, it felt like a soft, steady flame that kept burning brighter. There was a day when we were having a long conversation about our past relationships. I told him about my experiences with women, and without any judgment, he shared his own stories, too. It was in that moment I realized how easy it was to be with him. I didn't have to hide parts of myself, and I didn't feel like he was trying to shape me into something else. He was just there, present, understanding, and patient. And as much as I loved the connection I had with women, being with Sean made me realize there was something about him specifically, that made my heart feel like it had found its home. I wasn't changing my sexual orientation overnight, but my heart was shifting. I couldn't deny that I loved him in a way that felt natural, not forced. He never pressured me into defining my sexuality or forcing me to explain myself. He just loved me for who I was, and that freedom made it easier for me to fall for him. It wasn't about his age or our differences, it was about how he made me feel valued, respected, and seen in ways I'd never experienced before. In the months that followed, our relationship continued to grow stronger. I wasn't trying to force myself into a box of what I thought I should be, and I was no longer concerned about the age gap between us. Sean's maturity didn't make me feel small or inexperienced, it made me feel safe, like I had someone to lean on, but also someone who was open to learning and growing with me. There was a balance of give and take that felt healthy, something I hadn't experienced in previous relationships. One of the most beautiful moments was when Sean introduced me to his family. It was a small gathering, just his parents and a few close friends, and I was nervous at first. But they were kind and welcoming, making me feel like I was part of their world. I could see where Sean had gotten his warmth and generosity. His mother pulled me aside at one point and told me how happy she was that Sean had found someone who made him smile the way I did. I started to share parts of myself that I hadn't with anyone before, parts of my past, my insecurities, my fears about the future. And Sean never made me feel judged. He listened, validated my feelings, and, more importantly, helped me see that I was worthy of love just as I was. That kind of emotional support was something I hadn't realized I was craving until I found it with him. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. There were moments of doubt, moments where I questioned my own feelings. The idea that I had once been so certain about my identity as a lesbian made it hard to fully accept what was happening with Sean. I remember one night, after a long conversation about our future, I asked him, what if this is just a phase for me? What if I'm not meant to be with a man after all? Sean didn't flinch. He looked at me gently, took my hand, and said, I'm not asking you to define anything right now. I'm not worried about labels or what the future holds. What matters is what we have right now, how we feel. And whatever happens, I'll be here. That reassurance made all the difference. I realized that I didn't need to have everything figured out to enjoy what was right in front of me. I didn't have to label myself as straight, gay, or anything else. All I needed to do was be present in the moment with him. That was the only thing that really mattered. I honestly didn't expect to fall for him. He wasn't the type of person I'd imagined I'd end up with, especially considering my history and the relationships I'd had with women. But there was something about him that immediately stood out. It wasn't just his age, but the way he carried himself, calm, confident, and genuinely interested in getting to know me as a person, not just as someone he could potentially date. We met at a mutual friend's party, and we hit it off instantly. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but there was something magnetic about him. He had this quiet, understated charm that made me want to know more about him. I loved how he listened, really listened, when we talked. I was used to dating women where the emotional connection often felt immediate, but with Sean, it was a different kind of pull. It felt slow, gradual, but intense in its own way. At first, I thought it was just a passing attraction. He was nice, smart, and had a kind of maturity that I admired. But the more we spent time together, the more I realized there was something deeper brewing. I was drawn to his wisdom and emotional depth. Even though he was only 50, he had lived a lot of life. He'd traveled, worked in different fields, and had relationships that had shaped him into someone who knew who he was and what he wanted. That self-assuredness was something I found deeply attractive. With Sean, I felt like I could be myself, without any pretense. It wasn't about trying to impress him or fit into any certain mold, it was about being honest and vulnerable. He respected that, and it made me feel safe. I hadn't always felt that in previous relationships, and that feeling of security was something I'd been craving for a long time. The age difference, though not huge, was something I considered at first. I took a deep breath and shared my truth with them. I told them that I wasn't choosing to be straight, nor was I rejecting my identity as a lesbian. I explained that I had spent years being very clear about my feelings for women, but that with Sean, something unique had developed, something deep and emotional that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't about gender for me, it was about him, who he was as a person, the way he treated me, and the connection we had built. I told them that my attraction to women didn't go away, but my love for Sean felt just as valid. Most of my friends, after taking some time to process, understood. They realized that sexuality and attraction aren't always defined by rigid labels. For some, it was harder to understand, and there were moments of discomfort, but I think, over time, they began to see that I wasn't trying to erase my past, I was just living in the present, embracing my own journey. I told them that I wasn't trying to abandon my identity as a lesbian, but I also didn't want to limit myself by being stuck in a box. I was still me, still someone who deeply loved and valued women, but now I was also in love with a man. One of my best friends, who was also a lesbian, had the most difficult time at first. She felt like she had lost a part of the community, like I was leaving something behind. She admitted to me that she had always seen me as a role model of sorts, and seeing me with a man made her question the authenticity of my feelings. But after we talked more, she came to understand that my love for Sean didn't change my support for the LGBTQ+ community. She even said, "You're still you, no matter who you're in love with. We can't always predict who we fall for, and you deserve to be happy, just like the rest of us." When I first realized I was falling for Sean and starting to question my identity, I had a lot of internal conflict. For years, I had identified as a lesbian, and most of my close friends were also lesbians. We shared a bond based on our shared experiences, and I valued the support and understanding they gave me as I navigated my identity. So, when I started to develop feelings for Sean, I worried about how my friends would react. Would they understand? Would they feel betrayed? Would they think I was rejecting my past or my identity? To be honest, the first conversations were difficult. I wasn't sure how to explain what was happening inside of me. I had always been proud of my identity as a lesbian, and now I was entering uncharted territory, which felt both exciting and frightening. I was afraid that my friends, many of whom had known me as a lesbian for years, would view my change in feelings as a rejection of my past, or worse, that they'd think I was turning my back on the LGBTQ+ community. When I finally started opening up to them about my relationship with Sean, I was surprised by the range of reactions. Some of my friends were initially confused. They'd known me as a lesbian, and they couldn't quite understand how I could fall in love with a man. One friend, especially, was hesitant. She expressed her concern, asking if I was just experimenting or if I was confused. She was worried I might be denying my true self.